The rite of severance was where a she-wolf went to be erased. Elowyn knelt on the cold stones of Thornmoor's great square, her hood pulled low, while 500 wolves of the gathered packs watched her first mate hold up the severing knife and declare her womb a grave. That was the word Aldrich used. A grave. She heard it strike the crowd and come back to her in whispers, the way a stone thrown down a well returns as echo. And she kept her eyes on the frost between her knees, because she had learned long ago that hope was the cruelest wound, and she would not bleed in front of them. 5 winters, Aldrich said, turning so the whole square could admire his grief. He had beautiful grief. He had practiced it. 5 winters I gave her. 5 winters the Ashvale pack fed her, sheltered her, waited for an heir that never came. The healers have spoken. The moon has spoken. Elowyn of Ashvale is barren, and I sever what the rites once bound. The knife came down through the braided cord that lay on the altar stone between them, the cord their wrists had shared on their mating day, and Elowyn felt the bond tear loose inside her chest, like a hook pulled out of a fish. She did not cry out. Behind her, someone laughed softly, and someone else hushed the laugh, which was worse. "Let her be cast out," intoned Elder Varick, his voice like dry leaves. "On this day of all days, so the Alpha King may see that Ashvale keeps its bloodlines clean. On this day of all days." That was the cruelty of it, the part they had planned like a feast. For this was the gathering of the moon, held once in a generation, when every pack in the kingdom of Carvane brought its noblest daughters to Thornmoor Keep to parade beneath the eyes of the Alpha King, who had no queen. They stood in a crescent along the square even now, 40 she-wolves in silver and white, furs at their throats, moonstones in their hair, each one bred and polished for a crown. And Ashvale had chosen this hour, this square, this audience, to cut Elowyn away, so that Aldrich could step into the crescent with a new bride candidate on his arm, his cousin's daughter, 16 and fertile as spring soil. "Rise, barren one," Elder Varick said. "Walk out of the gathering with your face uncovered, as the rite demands, so all may know you." Her hands shook on her hood. "Please," she whispered, to no one, to the frost. Then she drew it back, and the cold touched her face, and 500 strangers looked at the disgrace of Ashvale. She made herself stand. She made her spine straight, because her grandmother had told her once, sewing by the fire, a needle flashing in the old scarred hands, that a woman's dignity is a thread that cannot be cut by anyone but herself. She turned toward the gates of the square, toward exile, toward winter roads and whatever short life waited for a lone she-wolf without a pack. And that was when the Alpha King stood up. She heard it before she saw it, the sound of 500 people catching their breath at once. King Caelric Stormcrown had sat through the whole gathering like something carved, a big man in black and iron on the high dais, watching the parade of noble daughters with all the warmth of a shield wall. He had not stood for the she-wolves of Silverfen, or Duskmere, or the golden twins of Carrowvale. He had not stood for anyone. He came down the dais steps slowly, and the crescent of noble she-wolves rippled and straightened, 40 spines lifting, 40 chins tilting, because surely, he was coming to choose at last. Lady Vessa of Silverfen stepped forward half a pace, a small, perfect movement, the movement of a woman who had never doubted a door would open for her. The Alpha King walked past her. He walked past all of them. He crossed the square through the ringing silence, boots loud on the stones, and stopped in front of the barren outcast of Ashvale, with her hood thrown back and her face bare to the cold. "What is your name?" he said. His voice was low, and it carried anyway, the way thunder carries. She had to try twice before it came out. "Elowyn, my lord. Not of Ashvale?" "Not any more, my lord. They have just now made that very clear." Something moved behind his eyes at that, quick as a fish under ice, gone before she could name it. He turned to face the square, and he raised his voice so it reached the walls. "Then I claim what Ashvale throws away. Elowyn, lately of Ashvale, will come to Thornmoor Keep as my contracted bride, by the old law of the king's choosing. Let the moon witness it." Someone screamed. It might have been Aldrich's mother. Lady Vessa of Silverfen went white as a snowfield. Elder Varick's mouth opened and closed like a man drowning in air, and Elowyn stood in the center of the kingdom's astonishment, thinking that she must have died on the altar stone after all. And this was the dream the dying are given. Why? The word left her before wisdom could stop it. She looked up into the face of the most feared wolf in Carvane, and she asked him, in front of everyone, The question that would haunt every hearth in the kingdom by nightfall. My lord, they have just told you what I am. Why would you choose me? The Alpha King looked at her for a long moment, and there was nothing cold in it, which frightened her more than coldness would have. You will know, he said, when you are ready to know. Come. It is starting to snow. And it was. The first flakes of the season came down over the square as he unclasped the great fur-lined cloak from his own shoulders and put it around hers, over the thin gray dress of a cast-out wife, and if the moon herself had descended and asked Elowin what was happening, she could not have said. The contract was read to her that evening in a firelit chamber of the keep, by a steward named Hallam, who kept glancing at her as if she might vanish. It was not like any marriage contract she had ever heard of, and she had heard many. Ashvale loved its contracts. You will be styled the king's contracted bride until the wedding at the full frost moon, 3 months hence, Hallam read. You will have your own chambers in the East Tower. You will want for nothing. You are asked for no heir. He paused there, delicately, as one steps around a hole in a bridge. The contract does not mention heirs at all, my lady. In my 30 years of service, I have never written such a clause, nor its absence. And what does the king ask of me? Elowin said. There is always a price. In Ashvale we paid the moon herself for good weather. Hallam turned the parchment. 2 things. First, you will take charge of the education and keeping of the young Lord Calm. Who is the young Lord Calm? Hallam's voice dropped. The king's son, my lady, 6 winters old. His mother, Queen Elwyn, rest her beneath the moon, died when he was 3. He hesitated. The boy has not spoken a single word since that night. Not one, in 3 years. The last woman set to care for him lasted a month. He is not cruel, my lady. Do not think it. He is only locked, like a winter pond. And the second thing? You will never, Hallam read, enter the west wing of the keep, nor ask the king what lies within it. The fire cracked. Elowin looked at the parchment, at the heavy black signature at the bottom, Caelric Stormcrown, pressed so hard the quill had nearly torn through, and she thought, he chose a barren bride, asks for no children, and locks away a wing of his own castle. What kind of man builds a marriage out of closed doors? I will sign, she said. What else was there? Behind her lay the winter roads. Ahead lay a mystery with a crown on it. She had always preferred mysteries to freezing. She met Colm on her 3rd morning, in the long gallery where the banners of Carvain hung like sleeping wings. He was small for 6, dark-haired like his father, and he stood pressed into a window alcove watching her the way a fox watches from a hedge, and the whole left side of his neck, disappearing under his collar, was a lace of old burn scars. She did not exclaim. She did not crouch and croon at him the way people do at damaged children. She sat down on the alcove bench an arm's length away, took out the little roll of linen, needle, and thread she carried from old habit, and began to mend the torn hem of her sleeve. The needle flashed. In, out. The boy watched. My grandmother taught me, she said, to the sleeve, not to him. She used to say a needle is the only blade that makes things whole. She held up the mended hem. Do you see? You cannot even find the tear now. It is still there, mind you. It will always be there. But it holds. Colm looked at the hem for a long time. Then he reached out one small finger and touched the place where the tear had been, and, finding it true, looked up at her with his father's gray eyes, and something in Elowin's chest, some stitch that had been ripped out on the altar stone at Thornmoor Square, pulled itself quietly closed. He came back the next morning, and the next. He never spoke, and she never asked him to. She taught him to thread a needle, to sew a button, to embroider a small crooked wolf on a kerchief, and if the court had known the heir of Carvain was learning needlework from the barren woman of Ashvale, the scandal would have shaken the towers. For the court had filled, since the gathering, with wolves who had not gone home. Chief among them, glittering like frost on a blade, was Lady Vessa of Silverfen. The king's charity bride, Vessa said, the first time they met in the great hall, and she said it smiling, with honey over the iron. She was beautiful the way a sword is beautiful. How brave you are, my dear, to stand where a queen should stand, knowing what everyone knows. I could never bear the whispers. You learn to bear whispers, Elowin said, when you have knelt through shouting. Vessa's smile did not move, but her eyes did. The frost moon is 3 months away, she said softly. Much can change beneath 3 moons. Kings wake from spells. Contracts have clauses. And barren fields, my dear, are plowed under before spring. She swept away in a hiss of silver skirts, and old Mother Osla, the castle healer, who had been pretending very hard to sort herbs at the end of the hall, came and pressed a cup of hot elderberry into Elowin's hands. "Mind that one," Osla muttered. She spent the whole autumn before the gathering, feeding half the council sweetmeats and promises, Elder Varick first among them. Silverfen has debts, and a queen's crown pays all debts. The old woman peered up at her, and her nose twitched, and a strange look crossed her face, there and gone. "You drink your tea, child, and, Elowin, if ever you feel poorly in this keep, in any small way, you come to me and no one else. Do you hear? No one else." "Why?" "Because I am old," said Osla, "and old women smell winter coming before the geese do." The king came to her slowly, the way the tide comes, so that she could never point to the moment the water reached her. He did not send for her at night, as the court smirkingly assumed. He did not send for her at all. But she would find him in the library when she came for a book, and he would gruffly clear maps from a chair, as if she had ordered him to. He began to appear in the gallery at the hour she sat with Colm, standing back by the banners, watching his silent sons sow crooked wolves, and the look on his face was the look of a man watching rain fall on a land burned black. "He does not sow for me," Ceolric said once, quietly, when Colm had been called away to his lessons. "He does not anything for me. He looks at me, and he sees that night. I am the shape of it to him." He stopped, jaw tightening, a man who had said more than he had said aloud in years. "What night, my lord? You know the tale." "Everyone knows the tale. I know what kitchens say. Kitchens also say I have a witch mark and eat nightingales." That startled a sound out of him that was almost a laugh, a rusty, unused thing. He looked at her sideways. "Do you never speak like a courtier, Elowin?" "I was never a courtier, my lord. I was a wife, and then a grave. Plain speech is all I kept." The almost laugh died, and something older and sadder took its place. "The fire was 3 years ago," he said at last. "In the West Wing. My queen died in it. Colman was pulled out of it, marked as you have seen. The whole kingdom knows that much." His hand closed slowly around nothing. "The whole kingdom does not know why the wing is locked, and you will not ask me. That is in the contract." "It is," she agreed. And then, because the ache in him pulled at her the way a torn hem pulls at her fingers. "But contracts say nothing about what I may hope, my lord. So I will tell you what I hope. I hope that one day you unlock it yourself, not because a clause expired, but because the weight of the key grew heavier than the fear of the door." He stared at her. A log settled in the hearth, and the light moved on his face, and he looked for one unguarded heartbeat like a man in fever who hears, from far away, a voice he has been listening for through years of dark. "Where did you learn to talk that way?" he said, hardly above a whisper. "From my grandmother. She was a healer. Moon-touched, the elders called her, when they wished to be kind. Witch, when they did not." "And she taught you healing?" "She taught me sewing," Elowin said. "She died before she could teach me the rest." Ashvale made sure of. She stopped. Some doors were hers too. "It grows late, my lord." "It does," said the king, and did not move, and neither did she, and the fire burned down between them like a spent argument. And when she finally rose to go, he said, to the hearth, so quietly she nearly missed it, "The tear is always there. But it holds. Your grandmother had the truth of it." He had been listening in the gallery longer than she knew. The first strike came with the Wolf's Night feast, when the whole court gathered under 1,000 candles. It was Vessa who rose, at the hour when wine had made the hall loud, and begged sweetly to honor the king's contracted bride. And it was Vessa's cousin who set before Elowin a gift, a bolt of bridal cloth, white as first snow, and unrolled it down the whole table for the court to admire. And there, embroidered into the heart of it in silver thread, was a wolf with a slashed belly. The mark sewn onto the doors of barren wives in the old cruel days. The hall went silent as a held breath. Someone tittered. Elowin looked at the slashed wolf for a long moment. Then she stood, took up the cloth, and turned to the king's table. "My lord," she said, clear as a bell over the hush, "I am given bridal cloth, marked with the old sign of the empty womb. I believe it is meant to shame me, but I knelt through my shaming already, in the great square, before 500, and there is nothing this hall can teach me about it." She lifted the cloth. "It is fine silver work, though it was sewn with a poor motive, and I was taught never to waste good thread. With your leave, I will cut it into swaddling for the pups born to the keep's servants this winter. Shame, like cloth, is only what we cut it into. For 3 heartbeats, nothing. Then old Osla began to thump her cup on the table, and the kitchen wolves took it up, and then the guards, and then, to the open horror of Lady Vessa, half the hall was thundering cups for the Barren bride of Thornmoor, and above it all, the Alpha King sat with his knuckles white around his goblet, and his eyes fixed on Elowin, and any wolf who dared look closely would have said that the Winter King was burning. That night, a knock came at her chamber door, and it was him, alone, snow still in his hair from the parapets. "They will not stop," he said, without greeting. Vessa, Varric, Ashvale behind them, whispering. "They want the contract broken before the frost moon. Tonight was a scratch, the next will be a cut. I can send you away from it, if you wish. A manor in the south. Safety, comfort, no whispers." His voice was flat, careful, a man laying his own heart on a chopping block, and trying to sound as if it were merely bread. "Is that what you wish, my lord?" "I asked what you wish." "I wish to know why," Elowin said. "It is 3 months since the square, and I am done being patient. You knew what I was when you crossed those stones. You ask no air of me. You gave your cloak to a stranger the whole world had just called a grave. Why me, Caelric? His name bare, the first time. It landed on him like a hand. Give me one true thing, and I will stand in your hall through 100 wolf's nights." He was quiet so long the candle guttered. "One true thing," he said at last. "Then hear this much. 9 years ago I was not a king. I was a second son with a sword, bleeding to death in the mud, after the battle at Redfern Crossing, in Ashvale lands. And someone dragged me into a root cellar and stitched me shut and fed me broth through the worst fever of my life, and I never saw her face, because I could not open my swollen eyes, and she was gone before I could stand. I heard only her voice, girl's voice, steady as a needle going in and out, telling me some nonsense to keep my soul in my body." He looked up, and his eyes were terrible and bright. "Telling me that a needle is the only blade that makes things whole." The floor seemed to tilt under Elowin, slow and enormous, like the deck of a ship. "The wounded soldier," she whispered, "in my 16th winter. They were burning the field hospitals, and my grandmother was dead a month, and I found a man in the mud with his side opened, and I could not save the others. I was one girl, I could only carry one, and I chose the one who—" Her voice broke off. "You never came back." "I came back," said the Alpha King of Carvain. "For 9 years I came back. I sent men through every village in Ashvale, asking after a healer girl with a voice like thread and firelight. Do you know what Ashvale told my men? That no such girl existed. They hid you, Elowin. They had already bartered you to Aldrich's family by then. A girl with moon-touched blood was a stain to be married quietly downward and shut in a house, not a name to be given to the king's riders. His hands, those huge scarred hands, were not quite steady. And then, on the day of the gathering, with 40 jewels arranged before me, I heard a voice from the far side of the square, saying please, saying it only to the frost. 9 years, and I knew it in one word. So no, I did not choose you, despite what they shouted about you on that altar stone. I did not hear one word they shouted. I heard you. The candle burned. Somewhere below, the keep dogs barked at the snow. That is one true thing, he said hoarsely, moving to the door as if to outrun his own nakedness. The rest waits behind a locked door, and I am not. I am not ready. Good night, Elowin. He was gone before she found her voice, and she sat until the candle drowned in its own wax, holding the one true thing to her chest like a coal that both burned and warmed. And beneath the wonder of it, a small thorn worked deeper. He searched 9 years for the girl who saved him, but he asks no heir, and locks the west wing, and flinches from his own son's eyes. What wound does a man guard more closely than the wound I stitched? It was Colm who paid for the rival's second strike. It came a fortnight before the frost moon, on a grey afternoon when the boy did not come to the gallery. She found the keep already boiling, guards running, and Osla's face at the boy's chamber door told her everything. Colm lay grey-lipped and burning, his breath a wet rattle, and on the table beside him a half-eaten dish of honeyed chestnuts that no kitchen wolf would admit to sending up. "Night, Bane," Osla said flatly when she had smelled the dish. "Ground fine, cooked in honey. Half a kingdom away by now, whoever paid for it. Enough to stop a grown wolf's heart." Her old face was clenched. In a pup this size, by morning, unless the moon is merciful, and she is rarely merciful in this keep. The king stood in the corner of the room like a man turned to stone, staring at his son, and Elwyn understood in one glance the whole architecture of his terror. The fire had taken his queen while he was away, and he had spent 3 years believing that everything he touched, everything born to him, everything he loved, was cursed to burn. And now the curse had reached out its hand again, and he could do nothing, and it was breaking him where no battle ever had. Out? Elwyn heard herself say. Everyone out but Osla. Caelric. His name cracked like a whip. The stone man blinked. Hot water. Your own hands. No one else's. I trust no dish and no servant tonight. Go. And the Alpha King of Carvain went, and fetched water like a kitchen boy. All night, while the 2 women fought for his son's life. What happened in that chamber between midnight and dawn? The kitchens would tell for 50 years, growing it larger with each telling. What actually happened was this. Elwyn held the boy while Osla forced purges into him, and when his little body had nothing left and the rattle deepened, and Osla sat back with the awful stillness of a healer out of tricks, Elwyn gathered calm against her chest and began, because there was nothing left but her grandmother's ways, to sing the old moon charm over him, the one for keeping a soul in a body, the one she had sung once before in a root cellar over a dying soldier. She sang it, and her hands grew warm, unnaturally warm, moon-warm, and Osla's eyes went wide, and the old healer whispered, moon-touched. By the mother of wolves, it is not a tale. And Elwyn did not hear, because she was somewhere far down inside the song, holding a small flickering flame in cupped hands against a great wind, saying, not this one. You have taken enough from this house. Not this one. Dawn came. The rattle eased. The fever broke like a rotten rope, and Colm opened his gray eyes, looked up at the woman who held him, and spoke, in a small rusty voice, 3 winters unused, the first word of his new life. Stay. Elwyn wept. Osla wept. And in the doorway, unnoticed, holding a basin of water gone long cold, the Alpha King put his back against the stone and slid down it like a man whose strings were cut, and covered his face with his hands, and made no sound at all. The whole keep should have rejoiced. And the whole keep did, for exactly 2 days, which is how long it took Lady Vessa and Elder Varric to sharpen the miracle into a blade. The accusation was made at the Frost Moon Feast itself, before the assembled packs come for the royal wedding, because Vessa had learned from the square that the deepest cuts are the public ones. It was Varric who rose, dry and sorrowful, and it was worse than Elwyn had imagined, because they did not accuse her of the poisoning. They were cleverer than that. The pup was poisoned, Varric told the hall, and the pup was saved. By what? Asked the old healer. Who will not lie? By charms. By witch song. By hands that glowed. Wolves of Carvain, the woman our king would wed is moon-touched, of a hidden witch line, and Ashvale knew it, and I will tell you at last why Ashvale truly cast her out. He let the silence crest. The barrenness was never a failing of her body. It was the moon's own judgment on tainted blood. And now the tainted blood sits beside the throne, and the heir speaks her name and not his father's. And ask yourselves, wolves, ask yourselves who profits when a king's son nearly dies, and a witch alone can call him back. She has bewitched the pup. She has bewitched the king. Silverfen saw it from the first. Uproar. 500 voices at once. Fear is a dry forest, and Varric had thrown a torch into it, and Elwyn stood alone in the eye of it, again, always, the shape of her whole life. And she looked at Caelric, and the king said nothing. He sat with his knuckles white and his face gray, and his silence fell on her like the severing knife. She had knelt through shouting, she had stood through slander, but his silence, after everything, she did not know how to survive. Then old Osla stood up on a bench, and her cracked voice cut the roar. You want to speak of the moon's judgment, Varric? Then we will speak of it, and of what an old woman's nose knows. She leveled one crooked finger at the delegation from Ashvale, at Aldrich, half risen, at his mother, Lady Bronwyn, gone very still. The first week this child came to my keep, I smelled it on her, under her skin, in her tea breath. Silverbane. 5 years of Silverbane, fed slow and small. The way you dose a she-wolf you never want whelping. I said nothing, for the poor girl clearly did not know, and the trail was cold, and who would believe old Osla against a noble house? She turned to the hall, but 2 nights passed, while the keep hunted the nightbane that touched the pup, my lads searched every guest cellar in Thornmoor. And in the baggage of Ashvale they found a physic box, and in the physic box, wolves, silver bane enough for 5 more years, and the account book of the healer Greta of Ashvale, may her hand wither, with the doses written out fair, and beside them, in the margin, the name of the lady who paid for them. Osla smiled a terrible old smile. Bronwyn, will you read your own name aloud, or shall I? The hall did not erupt this time. It went cold, cold as the square in first snow, and every eye in it turned to Ashvale, and Lady Bronwyn's face was answer, confession, and sentence all at once. She was never barren. Osla said it slowly, like nails going into a coffin lid. She was poisoned, 5 years, in her own home, by her mate's own mother, to keep the moon-touched line from bearing, and then she was knelt down in the great square, and shamed before the kingdom for the crime they did to her. That is your moon's judgment, elder. That is your clean bloodline, Ashvale. May you all be very proud. And Elowyn stood in the wreckage of her own history and felt the world remade around her. 5 years of counted moons, 5 years of quiet monthly grief, 5 years of Aldrich's cooling eyes and the word grave, all of it a lie with a ledger, and she could not breathe, and she looked for the only face that mattered now, and found the Alpha King already on his feet. He came around the high table. He was not calm. Everyone in that hall had seen the Winter King angry, cold anger, iron anger. No one had ever seen this, the fire under the glacier at last, and men twice her size stepped back from his passing. But it was not to Varric he went first, nor to Ashvale. He came to her, before the assembled packs of Carvain, and he did the one thing nobody expected. The feared Alpha King of Carvain knelt. I made you a promise in a snowfall, he said, and his voice carried to the walls because he meant it to, that you would know why I chose you when you were ready to know. Hear it now, all of you, since this hall is so hungry for truths. 9 years ago this woman saved my life in the mud of Redfern Crossing, and vanished, and I searched for her through every winter since, and when I heard her voice again in the great square, I would have chosen her if she had come to me barren, branded, cursed, or crowned in thorns. But there is a truth below that one. He drew breath, and it shook, and he let the whole kingdom hear it shake. You all know what burned 3 years ago. You do not know that I was told, by the wise women who tended the queen, that the fire was no accident of candles. It was set. And it was set because my Elwyn had begun to walk the old moon paths herself, seeking healing for our son's weak lungs, and someone in this court called that witchery, and decided the crown must be cleansed of it, and I have never found the hand that struck the flint. 3 years I locked the West Wing and everything in it, her herb room, her charms, her songs written out in her own hand, because I could not look at what my kingdom's fear had cost me. 3 years I let my son go silent, rather than speak of his mother, and called it protecting him. He looked up at Elowyn, kneeling still, the iron crown catching the firelight. Then the moon sent me a moon-touched woman, with thread and firelight in her voice, and my son said his first word in 3 winters, and it was her word. I am done being afraid of the old ways, and I am done letting fear sit on my counsel. He rose, and turned, and his voice went to iron. Varric, you knew Greta's ledgers. Your seal is in that account book twice, witness to payments, and my guards have had 2 days with your correspondence, and we will discuss, before the law speakers, what Silverfen promised you, and what was in the honey on those chestnuts. Take him. Take the healer Greta. Lady Bronwyn and her son will be given to the law speakers of their own pack, and if Ashvale shields them, Ashvale and I will have words the like of which this kingdom has not heard in 100 years. Guards moved. Varric went grey and babbling between them, and it was his babbling, before the law speakers in the days that followed, that pulled Lady Vessa down with him. The Nightbane traced coin by coin back to Silverfen's debts and ambitions, and the she-wolf, who had never doubted a door would open for her, passed instead through the one door in Carvain that never opens twice. But that was all later. In the hall, in the ringing stillness after the guard's boots, the Alpha King stood before his contracted bride, and all his iron was gone, and he was only a man, holding out his hand, palm up, the way you reach toward a wild thing you have no right to hope will come to you. You asked me once for one true thing, he said, softly now, only for her, though the kingdom leaned in to listen. Here is the last of them, Elowyn. I did not choose you in front of every noble she-wolf in the kingdom, because you were the girl from the root cellar, or for the boy, or for the old blood in you, though every one of those things is a wonder to me. I chose you because in the worst hour of your life you stood up off those stones with your spine straight and asked the most feared wolf alive to explain himself. I have been obeyed my whole life. I had never once been seen. Marry me, not by contract. By choice. Mine is made, it was made 9 years ago in the mud. I am only waiting, as I have somehow always been waiting, on your voice. And Elowin, cast out for being Barren, chosen in front of every noble she-wolf in the kingdom, looked down at the scarred open hand of the Alpha King and heard her grandmother by the fire, a needle flashing, the only blade that makes things whole. Then hear it, Caelric Stormcrown, she said, and put her hand in his. I choose you back. What the kingdom remembered afterward was the sound, 500 wolves rising at once, cups and fists and voices, and above it all, a small boy in his nightshirt, who had escaped his nurse to watch from the gallery stair, shouting her name again, his new favorite word of the 3 he now had, and the Winter King laughing, actually laughing, as he caught his son up onto his shoulder with one arm, because his other hand was not available, being occupied, and remaining occupied, with hers. They were wed at the full frost moon in the snow-dusted courtyard under a sky like polished black stone, because wolves marry beneath the open moon, or not at all. She wore no veil. She had been hidden enough for one lifetime. The claiming kiss, their first, landed to a roar that startled the ravens off the towers, and it tasted of winter air and wood smoke, and 9 patient years, and it was worth every one of them. And, on the morning after the wedding, the Alpha King took a key of blackened iron from the chain where it had hung against his heart for 3 years, and he walked with his wife and his son to the west wing, and his hand shook, and Elowin put her hand over his hand, and Calm put his small hand over both, and together, the House of Stormcrown turned the key that had grown heavier than the fear of the door. They opened the shutters. They let the winter light fall on Queen Elwyn's herb room, on the dried lavender and the moon charms and the songs written out in a dead woman's careful hand, and Calm walked among his mother's things, touching them one by one, whispering his 3rd word, which was Mama, and it broke all 3 of them, and it began to heal all 3 of them, in the way of needles, which hurt going in, and make things whole. Spring came late to Thornmoor that year, but it came. On a green evening after the thaw, the Queen of Carvain sat in the west wing, in the herb room that was hers now and Elwyn's still, both at once, as such rooms can be. Calm sprawled on the hearthstones, sewing a lopsided wolf onto a banner, and chattering, blessed unstoppable river, 3 winters of dammed-up words all spending themselves at once. Caelric sat with his crown off, and his boots up, watching them both with the undefended face he wore now behind these particular walls. And Elowin, needle flashing, in and out, steady as firelight, rested her free hand on the curve of her belly, where, beneath her palm, faint as a moth against a lantern, the moon's own answer to 5 stolen years had quickened 3 days past, a secret she was saving for midsummer, and smiled at her stitches. She had knelt on cold stones and been called a grave. She had walked out of one pack's shame into a kingdom's wonder, and she had learned, at last, the truth her grandmother's needle had been teaching her all along, that the tear is always there, in every life, in every house, in every heart worth the name. It will always be there, but it holds. Oh, it holds. Thank you so much for listening to this story, my dear friend. If it touched your heart even half as much as it touched mine to tell it, then this long night was worth it. Tell me something in the comments, because I truly want to know. When the hall went silent and the king said nothing, did you believe, even for a moment, that he would abandon her? Or did you trust him all along? I read every answer. And if you love stories of overlooked women who turn out to be the treasure of the kingdom, make sure you subscribe and turn on the bell, because there are many more nights like this one waiting for us. Until the next full moon, sleep warm.